South Dakota, 1880. The cutting prairie wind carried the smell of gunpowder and dried blood. When the judge struck his gavel, condemning Thomas Whitley to hang, no one in the courtroom dared to applaud. Everyone knew the truth. That 16-year-old boy was no murderer. It had been a terrible accident, a tragedy born from the desperation of two orphaned brothers trying to survive in a merciless land. But the law of the Old West understood nothing of compassion. The injured boy's father had influence, money, and a thirst for vengeance, and Thomas, with no one to defend him, would be just another body swinging in the town square at dawn. What no one expected was that very night, the shadows in the cell would move. A tall man with eyes cold as steel and hands marked by decades of violence would tear out the bars like pulling weeds. His name was Jesse Whitley, the grandfather Thomas had never known. The most wanted outlaw in 7 states. A ghost risen from hell. "Let's go, boy," were his only words. And so began the most improbable journey of the Old West. A killer grandfather and his innocent grandson, bound by blood and hunted by the law. 1,500 miles to the Mexican border. Sheriffs, bounty hunters, hostile tribes, and the merciless desert between them and freedom. But Jesse had a plan, and nothing, not bullets, not death, would stop him from saving that boy. This is the story of impossible redemption, of loyalty tested by fire, and of the final act of love from a condemned man. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment what country you're listening from. I love to know. Now stay until the end, because this journey will tear your heart from your chest and show you that even in the darkest souls, there can be light. The Whitley farm had never been large. 20 acres of parched land, a leaning barn, and about 30 pigs. That's all that remained after typhoid fever took John and Martha Whitley in a cruel winter. Thomas was 16 when he held his mother's cold hand for the last time. His brother Samuel, only 12. No relatives nearby, no neighbor willing to take in 2 boys with no future. "We'll make it, Sam," Thomas had promised, digging the 2 graves under the oak tree behind the house. "I'll take care of you." And he tried. God knew he tried. They planted corn in the spring, but drought destroyed half the crop. The pigs were their only hope, hardy animals his father had raised with care. In the fall, the time finally came to sell them in town. They loaded 8 fat pigs onto the old wagon. The trip to Deadwood took half a day. Thomas checked the money hidden in the mattress before leaving, $11.40. Everything they had in the world. In town, the Garfield and Sons butcher shop dominated Main Street. Old Garfield was known for fair prices, but who attended them was his son, Marcus, a fat man with pig eyes and a false smile. 8 pigs? Marcus walked around the animals, poking them with his cane. "I'll give you $20 for the lot." Thomas's heart sank. "Sir, your father always paid 40 for this quantity. These are top-quality animals." "My father is sick, boy. I'm in charge now. $20 or take your pigs back home." Samuel grabbed his brother's arm, frightened. Thomas felt rage boiling, but what could he do? They needed that money. Winter was coming. "I also have a horse," he said, voice trembling. "The chestnut mare. Good for hauling." Marcus examined the animal with renewed interest. $30 for the pigs and the horse. It was a blatant robbery. That horse alone was worth 50. But Thomas had no choice. He accepted the deal, and that would be the first step toward hell. With $30 miserable in his pocket, Thomas headed to the Anderson store. They needed flour, salt, beans, and seeds for spring planting. While he negotiated with the shopkeeper, Samuel waited on the street watching horses and wagons pass. That's when he saw the boy, Billy Harding, son of the richest rancher in the county, 16 years old, tall and strong, always accompanied by 2 equally arrogant friends. Billy recognized Samuel immediately, the Whitley orphan, the boy with nothing. Well, Billy approached, smiling cruelly. "Did the little piggy sell his pig brothers today?" The friends laughed. Samuel tried to ignore them, but Billy blocked his path. "I'm talking to you, you wretch. My father said you'll lose the farm before winter. You'll starve to death like rats." Samuel clenched his fists. "Get out of my way." "Or what?" Billy shoved him hard. Samuel staggered, falling backward into the street mud. The humiliation burned more than the pain. Samuel got up and lunged, connecting an awkward punch to Billy's face. The bigger boy didn't even flinch. He grabbed Samuel by the collar and started punching him, once, twice, 3 times. Blood spurted from the boy's nose. That's when Thomas came running from the store. "Let go of my brother!" He threw himself at Billy with blind fury. The two rolled in the mud, trading blows. Thomas was older, more desperate. He managed to pin Billy down and delivered a precise blow to the side of the boy's arm. A horrible crack was heard. Billy screamed. His arm hung at an unnatural angle. People gathered. Thomas stood up, panting, seeing what he had done. The hatred in Billy's eyes promised revenge. "You're going to pay for this, Whitley," he hissed through tears of pain. "My father is going to destroy you." Thomas grabbed Samuel and ran to the wagon. He didn't know he had just signed his death warrant. 3 days later, dust on the horizon announced visitors. Thomas was repairing the pig fence when he saw the elegant carriage coming up the path. His stomach churned. He recognized that vehicle. It belonged to Cornelius Harding, the most powerful man in the county. Samuel ran out of the house. "Thomas, what are we going to do?" "Stay quiet. Let me do the talking." Harding descended from the carriage with calculated movements. He was a tall man with a graying beard and hard eyes. Beside him, Billy wore his arm in an expensive sling, made by the best doctor in Deadwood. "Mr. Whitley." Harding's voice was cold as ice. "You broke my son's arm." Thomas swallowed hard. "He was beating my brother, sir. I'm not interested in your excuses, boy. My son can't work for 2 months. 2 months. That costs money, costs productivity. I have no way to pay compensation, sir. We barely have enough to eat." Harding smiled, but there was no warmth in that gesture. "I know exactly your situation, boy. That's why I came with a proposal. You'll work on my ranch, every day, from dawn to dusk, until the debt is paid." Thomas felt the trap closing. "But sir, I need to take care of our land, otherwise—" "The choice is simple. Accept my proposal, or I speak with the sheriff about deliberate assault. You'll spend the winter in jail, and your little brother will go to the orphanage in Rapid City." Samuel sobbed. Thomas felt the world collapse. There was no choice. "How long?" 2 months. You start tomorrow at dawn." Harding returned to the carriage, but Billy stayed behind for a moment, approaching Thomas. "My father is generous," he whispered, venomous. "I would have preferred to see you dead." And those words would become prophetic in a terrible way. The days at the Harding Ranch were hell. Thomas woke before sunrise, rode 2 hours to Cornelius's property, and worked until his body screamed for mercy. He cleaned stables, repaired fences, hauled hay. Billy watched from afar, smiling cruelly whenever Thomas stumbled from exhaustion. At home, Samuel took care of the small farm alone. At night, the brothers barely talked. Thomas fell into bed too exhausted for words. But one November morning, everything changed. Samuel woke Thomas before dawn. "I need you to go hunting. We have no more meat, nothing." Thomas looked out the window. It was still dark. "I need to go to the Harding Ranch. Please," Samuel's eyes pleaded. "Just today. I'll go with you. We can get a deer and come back before they notice." Thomas knew it was risky, but Samuel's empty stomach spoke louder. They took their father's old rifle and headed to the woods to the south. The morning fog made everything spectral. They walked in silence for an hour until Thomas spotted movement among the trees. A dark shape, large. A deer. He raised the rifle slowly, aimed. His heart pounded. He fired. The animal fell. But then they heard another sound, a human scream, sharp and full of pain. "No!" Thomas dropped the rifle and ran. The scene he found would haunt him forever. Cornelius Harding lay on the ground, clutching his chest. Blood ran between his fingers. His wide eyes of shock met Thomas's. "You shot me. It was an accident. I didn't see you. I thought it was a deer." Samuel came running, saw the scene and froze in horror. Harding tried to speak, but blood poured from his mouth. His eyes lost focus, and then silence. Thomas knelt, trembling violently. "What have I done? God, what have I done?" And in that moment he knew. His life was over. The sheriff arrived before noon. Someone had heard the shot and the scream. When they found Thomas still kneeling beside Harding's body, shaking and covered in blood, the conclusion was immediate. Thomas Whitley, you're under arrest for the murder of Cornelius Harding. It was an accident, I swear. I thought it was a deer. But no one believed, especially after Billy told his version, how Thomas had attacked him violently, deliberately broken his arm, threatened to kill him. How his father, worried about new attacks, had gone to the woods that morning to find Thomas and stop him from causing more violence. He saw me and shot. Billy lied with conviction, tears in his eyes. He murdered my father in cold blood. Samuel screamed it was a lie, but he was just a child. Who would believe him against Cornelius Harding's son? The trial was quick, brutal. Judge Maxwell, an old friend of Harding's, conducted the proceedings with barely disguised fury. Thomas had no lawyer, no money, no one. The prosecution witnesses multiplied. Townspeople who barely knew Thomas spoke of his violent temper, his lack of respect for authority. The butcher Marcus testified that Thomas had threatened him when they negotiated for the pigs. All lies, but well-constructed lies. When the verdict came, Thomas already knew. He saw it in the jury's eyes, in the crowd's whispers, in Billy's poorly disguised satisfaction. Thomas Whitley, the judge's voice echoed in the silent room. You have been found guilty of first-degree murder. I sentence you to death by hanging. The execution will be carried out in 2 weeks, at dawn on the 28th of November. Samuel screamed, tried to run to his brother, but was restrained. Thomas looked at him for the last time before being dragged to the cell. 14 days of life remained. News of the trial traveled fast across the Old West. In newspapers, in taverns, in travelers' conversations, orphan sentenced to hang for murdering wealthy rancher. Just another banal tragedy in a land of tragedies. But in a small town in New Mexico, an elderly woman read the newspaper, and her face went pale. Clara Whitley was 63 years old. She lived a quiet life, sewing and selling her work. She had been beautiful once, before life dimmed her light. She carried a secret for decades, a brother the world believed dead. Jesse Whitley. The outlaw, the bank robber, the killer. Clara hadn't seen Jesse in 15 years since he fled from the law for the last time, but she knew he was alive, hiding in some hole in the mountains, waiting for the world to forget him. She took paper and pen and wrote with trembling hands, Jesse, your grandson Thomas will be hanged in 2 weeks in Deadwood, South Dakota, condemned for a murder he didn't commit. He's just a boy, orphan, alone. I know you've never been a good man, but that boy has your blood. He deserves a chance we never had. Do something right for the first time in your damned life. Clara. She paid a fast messenger with instructions to search for Jesse in places only she knew. 6 days later, in the San Juan Mountains, a gray-haired man with eyes like ice read the letter by the light of a weak campfire. Jesse Whitley was 58 years old, 23 men dead, 12 banks robbed, a lifetime running. He was tired, so tired. But when he read about Thomas, something awakened inside him. Not redemption, and he was beyond that, but perhaps one last purpose, one last act before hell claimed him definitively. He saddled his horse in the darkness of night. Death was riding toward Deadwood. The Deadwood cell hadn't been built to hold desperate men. It had iron bars, yes, but old and rusted. Sheriff Thompson trusted more in the distance to freedom than in the bars. Where would a fugitive go? The prairie stretched for miles without shelter or water. Thomas spent his days looking through the small window, watching Samuel visit every day. His younger brother brought food, cried, begged Thomas to be strong. But how to be strong when he knew that in a few days a rope would tighten around his neck? On the night of the 13th day, Thomas was lying on the hard cot when he heard a strange sound. Metallic, scraping. It came from outside, from the back wall of the jail. He sat up, heart racing. Was it his imagination? The sound continued, scraping, soft pounding. And then, a crack. Part of the wooden wall moved. A gap opened, and through it, a rough hand appeared, holding a gun. Don't make a sound, boy. The voice was deep, hoarse, loaded with years of whiskey and violence. A man squeezed through the opening, tall, thin, with a deep scar cutting his face from eye to chin, grey hair under a black hat, eyes that had seen too much. Who are you?" Thomas whispered. "Your grandfather, Jesse Whitley. And you've got 10 seconds to decide if you want to live or die on that gallows." Thomas couldn't process it. His grandfather? The man was a legend, a nightmare children used to scare themselves. "I don't have time for explanations." Jesse worked on the cell bars with a metal tool. "Your Aunt Clara wrote me, told me your story. I know this kind of injustice. This world is full of it." The bars gave way with a metallic groan. Jesse grabbed Thomas's arm. "Let's go, now." They exited through the back of the jail, where 2 horses waited in the darkness. Jesse helped Thomas mount. "Where are we going?" "Mexico. Your Aunt Clara is waiting. But it's 1,500 miles of hostile territory, and when dawn comes, half the territory will be hunting us both." Thomas looked back toward the small town where Samuel slept. "My brother. He's safe. It's you who's marked to die. Now ride." And so began the most improbable journey of the Old West. The sun had barely risen when Sheriff Thompson discovered the empty cell. The broken wall told the story. His face turned red with rage. "That bastard!" He kicked the office desk. "Jesse Whitley, it had to be him." Deputy Marcus, a fat and nervous man, swallowed hard. "Sheriff, nobody's going to want to go after Jesse Whitley. You know his reputation. How many men has he killed?" 23, Thompson spat. "That I know of. And now he has my prisoner." "My prisoner." He went out to the street and started yelling, recruiting men. But Marcus was right. When the name Jesse Whitley was spoken, men's eyes looked away. Excuses appeared, urgent commitments. Only 2 volunteers presented themselves, both young and foolish deputies, seeking glory. Thompson knew it wasn't enough. That's when the 3 strangers arrived. They entered town at noon, mounted on black horses carrying impressive arsenals. The leader was a thin man named William Cade, famous bounty hunter, cruel and efficient. His companions, the Turner brothers, were equally dangerous. "We heard Jesse Whitley escaped," Cade said, smiling. $40,000 reward. Dead or alive, right?" Thompson nodded, relieved and worried at the same time. "And the boy?" 20,000. "But honestly, Sheriff," Cade adjusted the gun in his holster, "I'm interested in the old man. 40,000 buys a lot of peace of mind." Thompson didn't like bounty hunters, but he had no choice. They went south, probably trying to reach Mexico. "Apache territory on the way," one of the Turners observed. "Those 2 are dead before they reach the border." Cade mounted again. "We'll find out. Sheriff, if we find the bodies, does the reward still stand?" Thompson thought. He wanted justice, but more than anything he wanted to resolve this. "It stands." The 3 hunters rode off, raising clouds of dust. Thompson gathered his 2 deputies. "We're going too. Jesse Whitley won't escape again." The hunt was officially declared. Jesse and Thomas rode for 3 days without stopping, sleeping only a few hours before dawn. Jesse knew every hidden trail, every water source, every place the law didn't reach. He was a master of survival, but Thomas was just a farm boy. On the 3rd day, he almost fell off the horse from exhaustion. "I can't take it anymore," he said, voice broken. Jesse stopped, looked at his grandson for the first time with something beyond urgency. "Listen here, boy. I spent 30 years running. I know exhaustion, I know desperation, but if you stop now, you die. Simple as that." "Why do you care?" Thomas finally asked. "You were never there. You never knew my father. Why risk everything for me?" Jesse remained silent for a long moment. When he spoke, there was something brittle in his voice. "Your father, John, was my son. I abandoned him when he was 5 years old. I chose the outlaw life and let your grandmother raise him alone. When she died, John looked for me once. He was 16. He asked me to change, for us to be family. I said no. I chose the banks, the guns, the life I knew." He looked directly at Thomas. "He cursed me that day, said I would die alone and go to hell. He was right. But before going to hell, I'm going to save you. It's the only right thing I can do." Thomas felt something move inside him, not forgiveness, but understanding. "Then teach me. Teach me how to survive." Jesse smiled for the first time. "First lesson? Never trust anyone completely. Second lesson, always have an escape route. Third lesson, he threw a knife to the ground at Thomas's feet. Learn to kill before they kill you. And the lessons began. A week later, they reached Apache lands, sacred and deadly territory. Jesse knew that crossing there was an enormous risk, but he also knew that most pursuers wouldn't dare follow. The Apache don't like white intruders, Jesse explained as they rode slowly. But they respect courage. If they find us, let me do the talking. It didn't take long. At sunset, 5 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks surrounding them. Their faces painted red and black, bows tensed, spears pointed. The leader, a tall man with a feather headdress, spoke in Apache. Jesse responded in the same language, making peace gestures. Thomas was paralyzed with fear, but Jesse remained calm. The conversation continued for tense minutes. Finally, the Apache leader nodded. The warriors lowered their weapons. Jesse translated, "They'll let us pass, but there's a condition. We need to help hunt a bear that's killing their cattle. If we kill the bear, we have free passage and food." "A bear?" Thomas swallowed hard. "I've never hunted a bear." "Then you'll learn fast." The hunt happened the next day. The bear was huge, fierce, with scars from ancient battles. When it attacked, Thomas froze in terror. It was Jesse who fired the first shot but missed the heart. The bear charged. Thomas remembered the lessons. He breathed, aimed, fired. The bullet hit the animal's eye. It fell, roaring, and Jesse delivered the final shot. The Apache celebrated. That night, Thomas and Jesse ate with them, shared stories through gestures and few translated words. For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt something beyond fear. He felt that perhaps he would survive. While Thomas and Jesse rested in the Apache camp, the hunt intensified. William Cade and the Turner brothers followed tracks with relentless precision. They found traces, extinguished campfires, people who saw 2 men pass. "They're heading to Apache territory," Cade said, studying the map. "That'll slow them down. Or kill us," one of the Turners observed. "The Apache don't like whites." Cade smiled coldly. "Then let's wait for them to come out. Jesse can't stay there forever." Sheriff Thompson and his deputies were 3 days behind, but determined. Thompson had something to prove. His entire career he'd heard stories of Jesse Whitley, the impossible-to-catch ghost. Now he had his chance. In a small town called Red Creek, he questioned an old woman who ran a trading post. 2 men, an old man, a boy. Yes, they passed here 5 days ago, bought ammunition and dried meat. The old man had terrifying eyes, cold as a grave. Where did they go? South, always south. They mentioned something about the border. Thompson thanked her and continued. But at night, when they camped, his deputies began to question. "Sheriff, is this worth it? Chasing a man who's practically a legend? How many men has he killed?" "Everyone who tried to stop him," Thompson replied dryly. "And that's exactly why we need to catch him, not for reward, but because someone needs to prove the law is stronger than any man." But deep down, Thompson knew the truth. He wasn't chasing Jesse for justice. He was chasing Jesse for pride, and pride was a dangerous motive. Jesse and Thomas left Apache territory at dawn on the 11th day. They had fresh supplies, rested horses, and according to Jesse, only 5 more days to the Mexican border. But fate had other plans. They were crossing a narrow canyon when Jesse felt it. That survival instinct honed by decades. Something was wrong. "Get off the horse, now." Thomas obeyed without questioning. Seconds later, a shot rang out, ricocheting off the rock above their heads. "Jesse Whitley!" William Cade's voice echoed through the canyon. "You're surrounded. Surrender or die." Jesse pushed Thomas behind a large rock. "How many do you see?" Thomas peered carefully. 3 men positioned in the rocks above, guns aimed. 3. Bounty hunters, looks like. "Cade." Jesse spat the name like poison. "He's good, very good, and he's not interested in taking us alive." More shots. Rock fragments flew. They were completely trapped. Jesse thought fast. There was only one way out, a narrow path behind them, but exposed. They'd be easy targets. "When I tell you, run to that path and don't stop. Understood? And you?" "I cover. Now go!" Jesse began shooting with deadly precision. forcing the hunters to duck. Thomas ran, his heart exploding in his chest. Bullets whistled around him, raising clouds of dust. Jesse retreated slowly, firing non-stop. He managed to reach the rocks where Thomas was hiding, but then he felt it, a sharp, hot pain in his left shoulder. He'd been hit. Shit. He pressed his hand against the wound. Blood ran between his fingers. "You've been shot." "I noticed, boy. Now mount and ride." They rode through the canyon under a rain of bullets. Cade and the Turners pursued them, but Jesse knew that territory. He led Thomas through paths only someone with his experience would know. When they finally stopped hours later, Jesse was pale from blood loss. "I need to get the bullet out," he said, pulling out a knife. "And you're going to do it." Thomas went white. "I can't." "You can and you will," Jesse shouted. "I'll teach you. Now light a fire." With trembling hands, Thomas followed Jesse's instructions. He heated the knife until it was red. Jesse bit a piece of leather. "Cut straight. Get the bullet out. Burn the wound. Fast." It was the hardest thing Thomas had ever done. Jesse's muffled screams would haunt him. But he did it. Extracted the bullet, cauterized the wound. Jesse passed out from pain, and Thomas realized that now he was responsible for keeping them alive. Thomas took care of Jesse for 2 days while the wound began to heal. The old man was tough. Decades of hard living had made him stronger than men half his age. But fever came on the second night, and Thomas had to cool his forehead with wet cloths, praying it wasn't infection. On the morning of the third day, Jesse woke lucid. "How long was I out?" "Almost 2 full days." Jesse cursed under his breath. "They're getting closer, I can feel it." They were right to worry. William Cade had found the blood trail. He knew Jesse was wounded, vulnerable. The hunt was coming to an end, but fate was preparing an unexpected meeting. Sheriff Thompson and his deputies finally caught up with Cade and the Turners in an abandoned town. The encounter was tense. "Sheriff," Cade said with barely disguised contempt, "I thought you'd given up." "Jesse Whitley is my escaped prisoner. I'm taking him back for hanging." "Dead or alive, Sheriff, the reward doesn't specify, and I prefer dead. Easier to transport." Thompson clenched his fists. "He'll have a trial. That's procedure." Cade laughed. "Procedure? Jesse Whitley doesn't deserve procedure. He deserves a bullet." The argument almost became a confrontation, but one of the deputies interrupted. "Gentlemen, while we argue, they're escaping. Why don't we work together? Split the reward after." Cade thought. He didn't like splitting, but it made sense. 7 men had better chances of catching Jesse than 3 or 4 separately. "Deal. But when we find him, I shoot first and ask questions later." Thompson didn't like it, but agreed. He needed that backup. United, they followed the trail. And Jesse knew he was cornered. Jesse mounted with difficulty, the shoulder still painful but functional. He studied the horizon, dust approaching. A lot of dust. Many riders. "They joined forces," he told Thomas. "Sheriff and hunters. 7 men, maybe more." "Can we run?" Jesse looked around. They were in an open area, with no significant cover. The pursuers would close the distance in hours. "No, but I have a plan." He led Thomas to a small canyon with rock walls, a perfect bottleneck for an ambush. He positioned Thomas in the rocks above with the rifle. "You shoot to scare, not to kill. Understood? Make them split up, confuse them." "And you?" "I do what I've always done." When the 7 men entered the canyon, Jesse was waiting. He fired the first shot, hitting Cade's hat. The men scattered, seeking cover. "It's a trap!" Thompson shouted. Thomas fired from the rocks, forcing 2 deputies to retreat. The gunfight began in earnest, bullets ricocheting, screams, dust and smoke. Jesse was deadly even wounded. His shots were precise, calculated. He hit one of the Turners' legs, taking him out of the fight. Another shot disarmed a deputy, but there were too many. Jesse felt a bullet graze his rib. Another hit the rock beside his head. That's when he saw it. Cade was aiming at Thomas, who had exposed himself too much in the rocks. Without thinking, Jesse ran into the open field. "Cade, here!" The bounty hunter turned his gun. He fired. The bullet hit Jesse in the abdomen. He fell to his knees, feeling the hot blood soaking his shirt, but he still had strength for one last act. He raised his gun and fired. The bullet caught Cade in the shoulder, throwing him backward. The gunfight stopped. Everyone realized Jesse Whitley was mortally wounded. The end was coming. Thomas ran down from the rocks, tears in his eyes, but Jesse shouted, "Stay where you are." Sheriff Thompson approached slowly, gun in hand but not aimed. He looked at Jesse, the legendary outlaw now bleeding on the ground, life quickly draining away. "It's over, Jesse." Jesse coughed blood but smiled. "For me, it was always over, Thompson. But not for the boy." Cade, holding his wounded shoulder, approached, staggering. "Just shoot him, Sheriff. End this." But Thompson didn't shoot. He looked at Jesse, then at Thomas in the rocks, just a frightened boy. "The boy didn't kill Harding on purpose," Jesse said, each word agony. "It was an accident. You know it. I know a setup from a mile away." Thompson remained silent. He knew. He'd always known. Cornelius Harding was corrupt, his son Billy was a liar. But politics, money, influence, that's when Cade tried something stupid. Seeing the sheriff's hesitation, he raised his gun to shoot Jesse. He wanted his $40,000 reward. Jesse saw the movement. With his last act of speed, he pulled a hidden gun and fired. But not at Cade. He shot at the gun that another hunter, one of the Turners, was stealthily aiming at Thompson's back. The bounty hunter intended to kill the sheriff and blamed Jesse, eliminating witnesses and keeping all the reward. Jesse's bullet deflected the gun, saving Thompson's life. The sheriff spun in shock, saw the Turner with the gun aimed at his back. By reflex, he fired. The bounty hunter fell dead. Cade and the other Turner, realizing they'd been discovered in their betrayal, tried to flee. Thompson's deputies captured them quickly. Thompson knelt beside Jesse. "You saved my life." Jesse laughed bitterly, blood on his lips. "Didn't want to die owing favors. The boy, take him to Mexico. My sister Clara is waiting. The younger brother too. Let him have the life I never gave my son." Thompson looked at the dying man, a killer, yes, but in this moment, just a desperate grandfather trying to correct past mistakes. "I'll have to take you back, you know that." "I know, but let the boy go, please," Thompson thought. His entire career, he'd followed the law to the letter. But there, in that blood-stained canyon, he saw something greater than the law. He saw justice. "Thomas," he shouted, "there's a town 20 miles south. A man named Rodriguez. He takes people to Mexico discreetly. Go there, you'll find your family." Jesse smiled, tears mixing with blood. "Thank you." Thomas came down, wanted to hug his grandfather, but Jesse made a negative gesture. "Go, boy, don't look back. Live. Live for both of us." Thomas mounted, one last look at his grandfather, and then he rode south, toward freedom, toward Samuel, toward a possible future. Jesse watched until the boy disappeared on the horizon. Thompson and his men took Jesse back to Deadwood. The journey took 4 days. Jesse was dying slowly. The bullet in his abdomen had caused irreparable damage. Each breath was agony, but he refused morphine. He wanted to be conscious until the end. When they arrived in town, a crowd gathered. The legendary Jesse Whitley finally captured. But instead of the monster they expected, they saw a dying old man, dried blood on ragged clothes. Judge Maxwell ordered immediate hanging at dawn. "But he's dying," the town doctor protested. "He'll die before the hanging." "Then we'll hang a corpse if necessary," Maxwell said harshly. "Jesse Whitley will be executed according to the law." Thompson visited Jesse in the cell that night. "You saved my life back there. Why?" Jesse looked through the bars, his eyes losing focus. "Because you gave my grandson a chance. We were even. Did the boy make it to Mexico?" "I prefer to believe he did." Thompson nodded. "He did. I received a telegram yesterday. He's with his aunt and brother, safe." Jesse closed his eyes, peace finally touching that face marked by violence. Then it was worth it. Everything was worth it. At dawn, the deputies had to carry Jesse to the gallows. He could barely stand, shallow breathing, grey skin. The crowd fell silent. There was no triumph in this, only sadness. The hangman approached with the rope, but before he could place it, Jesse took one last deep breath and died. Right there standing, held by the deputies, The doctor checked the pulse. He's gone. But Maxwell, still bitter, shouted, "Put the hood on his head! Hang him! I'm going to kill that bastard again!" The hangman, uncomfortable, obeyed. They put the black hood on Jesse's head, the rope around the neck of a corp tentar novamente continuas. Thompson turned his back, disgusted. When the trapdoor opened, it was only a lifeless body that swung in the morning breeze. Jesse Whitley, killer, thief, outlaw, was dead, but his last act of redemption would live forever. This story shows us that redemption is never too late, even for those society considers lost. Jesse Whitley lived a life of violence and crime, but in the end, he chose to sacrifice everything, including his own life, to save an innocent. Thomas and Samuel found peace in Mexico with Aunt Clara, built an honest life, carrying the memory of the grandfather they never knew, but who died for them. The scar of those days never completely disappeared, but it served as a reminder that even in the darkest places, there can be light. The Old West was brutal, unjust, cruel, but it was also where ordinary men made extraordinary choices, where a killer became a hero, where a sheriff chose justice over the law, and where 2 orphans survived against all odds. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share with someone who needs to hear about second chances. Comment below. What moment of this journey moved you the most? And if you know someone who needs to believe it's never too late to do the right thing, share this story. See you in the next story. Until then, remember, no matter how dark your past, you can always choose a different future. Thanks for staying until the end. See you soon, friends.
The desert wind begins to sigh across the sand beneath wide sky. A memory starts its gentle ride where 2 young souls found their true pride. His deed remains on dusty trails, a love that conquered all the gales, that outlaw's gone but not forgot, a peaceful resolution wrought. No shadow falls where he once stood, a silent promise understood. He broke the chains that held us bound. No greater freedom could be found. His deed remains on dusty trails, a love that conquered all the gales, that outlaw's gone but not forgot, a peaceful resolution wrought. Now quiet peace fills up the air, a whispered hope beyond compare. His spirit rides on every breeze, bringing the restless heart ease.